Hello, my name is Uta Lambertz and I'm a curator at Kampnagel in Hamburg, Germany. Kampnagel is a theater venue and usually we produce and present formats between music performance, theater and political discourse, which we usually present in our 6 spaces, which are all closed down due to the COVID-19 crisis. From next week on, we will slowly reopen our space. Well, actually not our space. What we will do first, open air formats since the shutdown in March. And this will be for a very, very small audience. And of course, we will keep the measures which we have to keep right now. So our audience, as well as our artists, will have to keep the 1.5 meter distance, which is now necessary to especially protect those people who are most vulnerable. To speak about solidarity in these times and how we can produce it, I would like to quote German philosopher Caroline Emke at the beginning, who says in one of her books that it all starts with acknowledging that not everybody is in the same situation as I am, which basically means that we have to acknowledge that not everybody is privileged in the same way. And this also, and especially goes under the circumstances of the pandemic, because this also means that not everybody is exposed to the same risk. I'm speaking about people with medical preconditions, elderly people, non-white people, the Black community, the LGBTQI star community. So people with depressions. So all those people are exposed to a much higher risk of becoming infected and a higher risk of actually dying from COVID-19. We as cultural institutions with a status in our city have the possibility to spread this knowledge, to spread this awareness, and actually to develop measures to change the situation for people who are in a bad situation anyways, and who are in a much worse situation under the circumstances of the pandemic. What knowledge do we produce in culture and art now, and how we should produce and distribute the knowledge? I think one very common reactions amongst theater venues here in Germany was that they immediately tried to figure out how to still be present and how not to be forgotten by their audiences. So basically everybody went online, but most of the time with formats and recordings they already had in their archives, which basically means they didn't create any new knowledge at all. But after this first shock, I think a lot of things have changed, and my colleagues and I started to find ways to be in touch with our artists, who are for us the biggest knowledge producers we are in touch with. We got in touch again, and and since then have been frequently in touch with them to still make their knowledge hearable and visible amongst our audiences. For example, we created a podcast which is called Stay in Touch, and basically we are interviewing our artists around the world and asking them about the situation in their home countries, about how they are navigating through the crisis, how the pandemic becomes a topic, like also like an artistic topic for them, and yeah. So this is one example with which we try to still like keep the contact between our artists and audiences. What we learned from the crisis: can we develop different post-crisis modes and conditions of art and cultural productions which will allow basic sustainability and reduce the precarious position of cultural workers and artists? So first of all, I would like to quote another colleague of mine, Tuke Royal, who works as an artist and queer activist in Berlin, who once said, like pretty much in the beginning of the pandemic, said, "I'm already tired to see this crisis as an opportunity," and I think he's pretty right. Yeah, but on the other hand, of course, you should also see something positive in that. And there is actually some things, I guess, which we can learn from the crisis. Because on the one hand, the crisis makes things, as mentioned before, more visible. We have maybe a bigger awareness for the inequalities we have in our society, because in a way, this pandemic works a bit like a lens. Inequalities seem much bigger than before. And this also means that at least in parts of our society, there is a rising awareness and also new forms of solidarity action. So just to mention neighborhood support, which suddenly evolved from this and which might stay after the pandemic is over. Regarding the post-crisis modes and conditions of art, I mean, in the arts production, for a very long time, we thought that who is not in the office is actually not working. And now we had to learn that home office and bringing together family life and working life is basically pretty possible. We also learned that not every international meetings has to be live. Yeah, I still think that international arts production is an important part of our work, and that international traveling will never become obsolete in this field. But it should be the artists who are traveling more, and not the curators who are traveling that much to meet each other. So I think maybe there will be a higher awareness, not only in the art sector, but also, and hopefully also in more business-related sectors, that deciding not to travel, but doing things by Zoom, Skype, or whatever is possible, and not only the more sustainable, but also the less pricey way to organize things between countries. And regarding the precarious position of cultural workers and artists, yeah, I know. I think worldwide we make the very sad experiences that even if there are support systems for cultural workers and artists, there are we see one more time that they are very, very precarious workers. And my hope would be that after COVID-19, also our governments will care more about them, and and that this has created an awareness that cultural workers and artists, even without the pandemic, live and work under very insecure circumstances, and that they do something to change this. Does COVID-19 crisis bring forward the idea of social equality, social states, and maybe universal basic income? How can this be reflected in culture and arts? Well, I would say no. I would say that the COVID-19 crisis makes those inequalities we have in our society more visible. And as said before, it works a bit like a lens, and under this lens, it becomes pretty obvious that it does make a difference in our society, whether you are black or white or non-white, whether you are heterosexual or homosexual, whether you are rich or poor. So racism, classism, homophobia become even more obvious. And of course, this is also maybe a possibility that the the COVID-19 crisis creates a bigger awareness and maybe also more anger amongst the society and a bigger will to change things after this crisis. This would be my hope. So, what political and policy approaches you would foresee for future in the field of your work, or how should it be changed in the future? Um, I think on the one hand, it will be important that as soon as the measures which have become necessary to protect us from COVID-19 end in the moment that the risk has been bent. So there will be the point that from a health perspective, certain restrictions won't be necessary anymore, and it will be our task to get back the freedoms we need to do international arts productions to get them back, so that our artists, no matter where they're coming from, will be able to travel again, will be able to get visas again, will be able to work internationally again. So this will be one thing. The other thing is that, of course, this won't be enough. We need to use the raised awareness about social inequalities, about the precarious situations of our artists, about the shitty working conditions of people who are working in the health sector in so-called relevant jobs, that they improve. And so there will be quite a lot of work to do, not only in the art sector, but in all the sectors.